Hey everyone, this is Brian from Motive Training and RJ's here. He's going to demonstrate hip extension and ways that we see people compensate. So today we're going to focus strictly on lumbar extension. So if you've ever done a donkey kick, a bird dog, a Romanian deadlift, a squat, lunge, any of those exercises, when you go to extend your hip, it's very likely that you'll see people compensate through that lower back. It's easier to see when we're having RJ in a quadruped position because we can see the curvature of his back moving, whereas when someone's standing, sometimes it's a little bit harder to identify. The goal of hip extension is literally hip extension, nothing else. We're not trying to combine those two movements together. If you're going terminal velocity, you're running full speed, you're sprinting as fast as you can, sure, you're gonna have lumbar extension as well as hip extension, but if your bias is toward lumbar extension instead of hip extension, that is a problem because your hip extensors are one of the strongest muscles in the body, so we want them doing their job when you walk, when you squat, when you deadlift. The lumbar spine shouldn't be the thing that takes on the load. So if you are doing any sort of hip extension exercise that requires you to be on all fours, we recommend having a slightly flexed lumbar spine. So what RJ is going to do is he's going to shift his weight back onto his feet until he gets rounding through his lumbar spine back here. The reason being is if we keep it flexed, he cannot extend it. Just like you can't simultaneously flex your elbow and extend it at the same time. You can only do one of those two things. So in this flex position, we can now have him train pure hip extension without his lumbar spine coming into play. This is a pretty extreme angle for hip flexion, so some people cannot do this. So what we do instead is we provide more stability for the lumbar spine in using something like a box or a stability ball or something like that. So we'll use RJ with the box to put underneath his belly, and we'll show you what that looks like in the same way that we just did a blocked off hip flexion, hip extension exercise. So he now has more stability through his back because he's able to just lay it across something, and now we can work hip extension that same way. So for someone that can't access deep hip flexion, deep lumbar flexion, we can just simply lay them over a box and try to tease out more hip extension on that back leg. So if you notice your lumbar spine is the first thing you feel when you try to bring your leg behind you, you need to find a way to fine-tune that exercise either by sitting further back or creating more artificial stability underneath to get those hip extensors to fire on their own.